Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another video. Now in this one we're going to be taking a look at QMK firmware, and I'm going to be showing you how I managed to get like two different sort of keymaps working on the same keymap. So I'll kind of explain what it is. So basically I have a keymap for say like Windows or Linux, and then for Mac, because you know Mac has to be special, it needs its own keymap. Well, like to use it properly at least. So for example, for Linux or Windows, to take a screenshot, it's just you press the screenshot key. On Mac you have to press like fecking 4 different keys for the same screenshot. So yeah, it's just sort of stuff like that. And then also I have like a symbols layer, so if I hold down this key it changes layer, and then for example this is the @ sign normally, but for Mac this would come up as like some other symbol, so I needed to like change this layer as well for it. So before, what I used to have is, so if you can see here on the left, this is QMK open here, and these are all the different key maps. So I used to have like a no mouse LD, so this is what I used for, so I'll just open it up here. So this key map here, I'll zoom out a little bit. So yeah, this key map here I used for like Windows or Linux, and then the no mouse key map, I use this for the Mac. So like I was talking about here, this is the screenshot. So I'll just zoom in here. Oops, zoom in here a little bit. Yeah, so for the screenshot on Mac, for some reason you need to press like 4 different keys to actually get it properly. And then if I go over to Windows or Linux or whatever, it's just like the print screen and that's it. Like, you know, like that's how it should be on a normal operating system, but whatever, I need to use Mac for work, so having like a custom firmware for keyboard makes it a lot easier to use Mac. But yeah, so as you can see here, I have 4 layers normally. So layer main, and then layer symbols, then layer macro is just kind of like extra features, and then layer gaming is just for gaming. So what the difference is for the Mac layout is basically the first and the second layer are slightly different. Well, like some of the keys are different, but it's pretty much the same thing. But yeah, just make sure you remember that. And so now if I go into the layer which is joined with Mac, so as you can see here, I have layer main, I have layer Mac main, I have layer symbols and layer Mac symbols. So this is basically just joining the 2 of the previous layers together. And now you may think, oh yeah, that's pretty easy, but there is a few kind of gotchas that I ran into. So first of all, when you're making your Mac layer, make sure the Mac layer is like directly above the layer it's replacing. So essentially in the firmware, what we're going to do is when Mac mode is on, we are going to replace this layer with this layer. And also same thing here. So as you can see here in layer Mac main, it gets this one. So this layer symbols here is basically ignored. So essentially what we're doing is we're replacing, like we're setting this layer as the kind of default layer instead of this one. And this only works if for example, like the layer symbols and the layer Mac symbols is directly above the layer it's replacing. So before, what I had was both of the Mac layers like at the end here, and that didn't work. It kept on going back like 2 other layers, and it was just a mess basically. Alright, so once you got that done, make sure you name these layers appropriately. So I have a where is it? Join. Wait, I'll just close these for a minute. Yeah, so I have like this shared definitions, which I import like everywhere. So if we just scroll up, you'll see here, this is what we are using. So make sure layer Mac is like right after the layer that it's replacing again. And so if you're using LEDs, make sure you name them as well, and I'll show you later on what happens there. So basically, because for the layer Mac, I want it to be the same LED layers basically for these 2 layers. So that's why you have like 6 layers here and only 4 here defined. If I go into my LED code here, as you can see, where you define like your LED colors and stuff like that, use these that are defined here. And then when you want to set layer color, so you probably on your keymap you'll be overwriting this function here. So here you would switch between which layers are active. So you'll be switching between these, and depending on which layer is active, you'll be setting the color. So you'll be setting these basically. So as you can see here, I have layer main, which is the first one, using the layer main color, and then I have layer Mac main also using the layer main color. So that's one of the things you need to get around, is like having the same LEDs, because well, if you change a lot of things, you might as well just add an extra color data here. But if you're just changing a few key bindings that essentially do the same thing, you might as well just reuse some of these and then save up on space. Alright, so next thing, to actually change layers, what I use is macros. So you would see here inside the macros layer, I set it here. So I have a custom key code here, stm_mac toggle. If you aren't familiar with how you define custom key codes, it's basically like this. And there I have it here. So just throw it into this. And then what you want to do is you want to go into your function, the process user function, which overrides the keycodes basically. So if I scroll down to the Mac mode toggle, as you can see, I just have a Boolean here. Should be around here somewhere. So there it is. The reason external is here is because I use this in a bunch of these different files. So this just tells the compiler that this is defined somewhere else, and that is defined, should be at the top here. Yeah, so I actually define it here as a Boolean, and you can use it throughout everything else. So yeah, toggle that Boolean basically. So if Mac mode is already on, turn it off. If it's off, turn it on. And then we're going to use this layer move function. And we're going to, if Mac mode is on, we want to enable it. So this sets the layer. Yeah, I'll actually show it to you guys here. Get rid of this. So if we search for layer move, should be here somewhere. Let's see. Alright, there it is. So turns specified layer on and turns all other layers off. So it will turn off your default layer as well, and then it'll just turn on the Mac mode layer in this example. And then if you wanna, when you toggle it off, you also toggle off, you set your default layer as your layer main. So that's kind of how that works. That'll get you pretty far. There isn't like a lot left to do. There's just one more thing. This is only if you're using dynamic macros. So if I just go back to my keymap, I have them here. So if you're using like dynamic record, so I have like 2 of them here, and then you can stop it and then play it. So I have them as my layer main for both of the, Mac layout and then the Linux layout as well. So yeah, what I wrote here, oops, wrong one. So yeah, what will happen is when you start recording this dynamic macro, the function switches to layer 0. So basically it just nukes your Mac layer or whatever. I know why they did that, like it's to avoid any weird issues between layer swapping, but for us, well, in my case anyway, that gets in the way. So if I'm like using my Mac layer and I start doing the dynamic macro, start recording it, it switches back to my normal layer, so the Linux one, and then basically all the Mac shortcuts won't work. So to avoid that, what you do is you go to this, so you go actually to the source code of the dynamic macro. So you can see where it is here in my comments on macros.c. And so when we go here, what we want to do is we want to get rid of, well, we want to comment out this layer clear. You want to comment it out in the macro play. So this is when it starts playing the macro. And you want to comment it out in, let's see. Yeah, record start. So yeah, that's like one of the very first functions here. So clear keyboard basically clears if you're holding down shift or anything like that, which is fine. It shouldn't really mess anything up. Yeah, and so this used to reset it back to layer 0 so that when you record the macros, it will always be the same. So by commenting this out, this fixes the issue with it nuking the Mac mode layer, and it works fine for me in my case because I don't really use any like super complex dynamic macros or whatever. But just take care if you do this because it might mess up some stuff, since at the end it won't reset back to the default layer basically. So if you're if you recorded the macro and then you're stuck in a different layer and you press play, it won't reset back. So it will kind of mess up the output of the macro unless you go back to where you actually start recording the layer. So that's why I won't really recommend you do this unless you actually know what you're doing. And I suppose if it doesn't interfere with your layout or whatever. So yeah, oh yeah, one more thing I suppose is if you want to spread out your files, because like before I used to have like a ginormous keymap.c, and now it's just tiny, whereas before you had to like scroll down and you had to find like for example my combos code is like pretty big so you had to scroll down through all that, for example, to get to the leader key and whatnot. So yeah, it was a pain to kind of deal with that. So yeah, I eventually split it up. So what I recommend doing is creating like a header file. I just called it shared defines. And what you want to do is just include every single kind of thing you're using. So every single variable that I'm using across multiple files. And then in each of these files at the very top, what you want to do is just include that header file. And then lastly, what you want to do is inside your rules.mk, you want to also add it to the source. So this will tell QMK to basically compile all of these extra files. So if you don't put them in, you'll just get errors and it won't compile this extra code. So yeah, that's kind of how you would do like multiple kind of how you'd merge multiple layouts into one file, into one keymap. Because before what I used to do is I used to compile and upload each layer or each layout individually, like before I was like, you know, starting work and that kind of thing. So it was getting annoying, so I just came up with this. It works pretty well. So yeah, thanks for watching and bye bye.